abuse every year. It's linked to 1 in 5 murders or manslaughter cases. Little wonder the government says it should be treated as a national threat on a par with terrorism. But what does that mean in reality? What happens when the person terrorising you is the man living in your home, or someone you once loved who refuses to stop abusing you? How quickly do the police answer your call? What support is there to help you stay safe? In the first of a series of reports, we followed a small charity right on the front line of Britain's domestic abuse crisis and found the mechanisms to protect victims are too often failing them. There are details in my report you may find upsetting.
I come home and all my windows have been put through with big, thick bolts. I contacted the police. At first, they wouldn't do anything. They said there was nothing they could do.
What is your biggest fear at the moment?
That at one point I will end up dead.
Trapped behind the boarded up window, a woman we're calling Chloe. A victim of domestic abuse for years, she's fled, but is far from free. She believes the attack, the footage sent to her on social media from a fake account, is part of an ongoing campaign of harassment, police unable to stop him or protect her.
I was on edge all the time. I wouldn't answer the door to anybody. So I was literally just sat, sleeping on the sofa with a big massive hole in my window.
Yeah, and what about this one at back?
This one was done on Friday.
Debbie Jones has come to see more damage done to Chloe's home in the past few days. She runs Resolute, a tiny charity in Barnsley in South Yorkshire, supporting victims and survivors of domestic violence.
That is still not deemed safe at all. For her to be sat in this situation, extremely vulnerable, perpetrator is still walking about.
This is how Chloe ended up frightened in her own home, but too scared to go out either.
It was really, really good at first, and it got to the point where I moved in with him and all of a sudden everything changed. I couldn't speak to my mum, I couldn't speak to any friends, I literally couldn't go out without getting questioned. I've been strangled to the point I've been passed out. I've been covered in bruises where I can't go out. I've had to lie to people and say, oh, I've just bumped into things.
Leaving him made it worse. The abuse continued. Respite came when he was remanded in jail. He eventually pleaded guilty to a string of offences including stalking and assault by beating. He got a 15-month suspended sentence and a 5-year restraining order. Within weeks of coming out of prison, Chloe's house was targeted. The police have been unable to establish the identity of the person who attacked the house. Meanwhile, any faith Chloe has in restraining orders fades away. She says he's had one before, but it didn't stop him.
The police like to say, yeah, we've given a restraining order, we've done something, but really they haven't done anything because they don't pick up on it.
Did you get a sense that actually, because he was breaching the restraining order, nothing was happening, that he became bolder?
Definitely. If they've done it once and they know they're going to get away with it, they'll continue to do it multiple times.
South Yorkshire Police told us its approach to protecting vulnerable people was rated as outstanding by the Police Inspectorate this year, and that tackling domestic abuse remains one of its top priorities. Domestic abuse is a stated priority for police forces nationally and for government, but we've examined data released last week that shows an alarming trend. In 2017, there were 93,593 domestic abuse-related prosecutions in England and Wales. But this year, that figure has fallen to 51,288, a staggering drop of 45%, despite a recent increase in crimes being recorded by the police.
The charity Resolute says it's no wonder so many of the women they support feel let down.
So I'm on my way to court for a case involving another one of the young women who are being helped by the charity. We'll call her Hannah. She fled a violent partner, but he continued to harass her even though there was a restraining order in place. And today, she's hoping the courts will do something about that.
It isn't her perpetrator's first time in court. In 2018, he was given a domestic violence protection order, which he breached 5 times. Now with another order against her breached, she wants to see him pay for what he's done.
The judge described this young woman's ex-partner as a man who's carried out a litany of terrible crimes, including harassment and violence. And he's also got a long history of flouting restraining orders. This time, he breached an order imposed to protect her twice in 5 days. And for that, the judge sentenced him to a year in prison.
So while he's in jail, Hannah is still left feeling let down. She's been here before. A short prison sentence, broken restraining orders, and then more abuse. To protect her identity, we've used an actor to tell her story. It is a depressingly familiar one.
They were good to start with, and then down the line he started hitting me and attacking me and chucking things at me when I was pregnant. Really scary. Yeah, really bad. He did just over 200 assaults on me. I kept reporting it and just didn't really do nothing about it until it got serious, and then they did something about it then.
He was prosecuted, a restraining order put in place, and sent to prison.
There was no point in jail because for 12 weeks, too short a sentence. Pointless. They don't stick to it. They breach it and then do it again and then breach it.
So while the restraining orders held no fear for her ex, the fear was all hers, as he continued to threaten and harass her, on occasions, even from jail.
Getting threats of him saying when he comes out he's going to kill me. He's horrible. High risk and definitely dangerous.
South Yorkshire Police said it was saddened to hear that both Hannah and Chloe felt let down by the wider criminal justice system, and said it would do all it could to bring domestic abuse perpetrators in front of the courts. Behind the bunting at a Barnsley community hall in a small rented office, Debbie Jones of Resolute says there are too many women like Hannah and Chloe that the system seems unable to keep safe.
Cases are getting more severe. We're seeing more rape, younger perpetrators, a lot more drugs and alcohol use. Yeah.
Last year, the government said violence against women, including domestic abuse, should be put on the same footing as terrorism by police. Deborah says she's yet to see it.
Nowhere near.
There's no evidence of that from what you see.
No. And a lot of it, I don't know if I'm allowed to say, but it's lip service.
With funds running dry, Debbie says the charity, run by women who are all themselves survivors, is finding it increasingly hard to help the growing numbers coming forward.
There's no deterrent for perpetrators. The perpetrators are getting very clever at how the system's working. They know exactly how to play the system. And the laws need to be tougher. It's as simple as that.
Chloe says she's left with few options: stay at risk or move away from everything else she knows.
You're a victim and then you get out of that situation and you're still a victim. And you'll always be a victim because you're constantly watching your back because nothing is ever done.
Well, tonight the government told us abusers who breach restraining orders face tough penalties, including jail time, and we're going further to support victims by piloting a new domestic abuse protection order, which will give courts the power to impose exclusion zones, curfews, and electronic monitoring tags on abusers. Crown Prosecution Service said, "We are determined to increase the number of domestic abuse cases going to court. We remain steadfast in that commitment, working with the police, victims and stakeholders to address the worrying fall in the number of prosecutions in recent years. Well, earlier I spoke to Nicole Jacobs, who is the Domestic Violence Commissioner for England and Wales. I asked first for her reaction to Hannah and Chloe's stories.
Well, I wish I could say I was surprised. I mean, it is appalling that we would have a situation in place where we have orders of protection that are being breached, and in these cases repeatedly, with little to no consequence. But I have to say, this is a fairly regular occurrence, and we've had super complaints. We've had this raised for years, and we're very little further forward.
So what is going wrong exactly in your view? Because you're exactly right. We know there's a huge rise in the use of these orders, but at the same time, the number of prosecutions for breaching them is dropping.
There's problems every step of the way. So we have situations where the court will order a restraining order or a non-molestation order. There's a variety of types of orders, and sometimes they're not served. So the perpetrator themselves isn't aware that the order exists. When it is served, sometimes the victim is not aware. And then, of course, we have repeated breaches that aren't dealt with. So it's a problem from start to finish. But this is one of the things I've said to the Home Secretary directly, is we need a much more consistent approach across all 43 forces, and we just simply don't have that.
The government have said that domestic violence should be on a par in terms of policing with terrorism. That is not happening. Are they not listening to you?
Well, I would say what we have all grappled with, including government and police forces themselves, is that we've been saying one thing and doing another for many, many years. We've said that this is important. We've said that it is a priority. It's not happening across all forces, and that's exactly what I told our Home Secretary when I was with him in a police station in London just last week, is that we are hearing some really excellent pockets of good practice, but we're not seeing the kind of drive to make sure that this is happening across all forces. And these are perpetrators who they are in fear of their lives from. And and that is the key thing we need to be tuning in and listening to. We can hear non-fatal strangulation, separation, escalation, all of the things that we know are high risk indicators of harm, stalking. These need to be of the utmost priority.
And what did the Home Secretary say in reply? I mean, did you exert any promises out of the new Home Secretary?
Well, I felt really confident that he was really interested in the kind of tactical policing and the changing approach for domestic abuse, but also sexual violence, and was very, very interested in knowing how that was happening. And I feel really confident he took on board very much the point that these more systemic changes are needed within the police, and that I think he understood that what the great practice we were seeing on that day may not be what we would be seeing across the board.
And just a point about the wider criminal justice system, if you would. A drop in the prosecution of domestic abuse-related crimes of 45% since 2017. Now, the Crown Prosecution Service told us they are improving their charge and conviction rates. Are you seeing enough improvement across the board?
No, I mean, we have a drop every year in our prosecution rates for domestic abuse. We are not headed in the right direction whatsoever. So we have to, and there is some work going on right now between police leaders and CPS about how they will work together, a joint justice plan, which I'm really pleased about, but we need to see that implemented with some urgency. And it is true that we are letting victims down, and we can do much, much better. We also need to have a priority of the kind of support that is needed for victims who are really coming forward and putting themselves at risk.
Because across the country, the urgency is because it's not just about women getting a poor service. Lives are at risk here.
That's right. I mean, domestic homicide is the most frequent reason women are killed in this country. For men, it's a tenth of our homicides for men as well. So these are serious crimes.